All right, we should be live on YouTube at the very least. On LinkedIn, honestly, I've had the worst experiences with, but here we go. So, thank you everybody for tuning in. For those that are LinkedIn lovers, you can catch us on YouTube. Anyways, the videos will be there as a backup. But today, I'm joined by my three wonderful co-hosts. We have Anibal and we have Brian. So, if you guys want to go ahead and just shout out where you come from, and we'll get into the topic of today's discussion, which is your genuine thoughts on Ignition and tools like it, the state of web development and web apps as they relate to controls infrastructure, and overall your honest opinions on the concept of open source and where you've seen it done well and other ideas you might have had in the environment of control systems. So we'll go ahead and kick it off to Brian for your intro.
Yeah. So it's nice to be here with you, Henry. Thank you for inviting me. My name is Brian Pribe. I'm the president and founder of Mock Controls LLC. I'm a systems integrator and also heavily involved in the 4.0 solutions community, and where Henry and Hannibal, my bad, have all met and talk quite frequently.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Henry, for the opportunity. My name is Anibal Velarde. I work for Proto Labs, a manufacturing operation for injection molding, CNC, and sheet metal. And there's, yeah, I'm think I'm forgetting one. I'm a new-ish employee there, so that's probably okay. Love what I'm doing. My traditional upbringing in tech was doing software for fintech most of my life, and then I discovered the joy of doing software for manufacturing operations. It's like the crocodile hunter type of experience, and switching from doing fintech and going into manufacturing software. It's an amazing journey, learning lots.
Awesome. Yeah, appreciate it. Uh, so I was mentioning before we behind the scenes that already in the less than a week that I've dared to speak out against Ignition, I've personally received various sorts of death threats in DMs and other literal like hate speech via email and whatnot. And I don't know if that means I'm necessarily doing something right or something wrong, but I gotta say, if enough people are getting upset about simply talking about against something, there's definitely something there. Whatever it is, I have no idea, but I'm sure as we continue with this conversation today and future videos, we'll get to the bottom of it. But the one thing I definitely wanted to start off with, and either you can go ahead and join on is your feedback really on Ignition, and not just as a product, but overall what you've seen with other people using Ignition from the customer experience of working with Ignition or tools like Ignition, and just we'll go off from there. So Annabelle, if you want to kick it off, Brian, if you want to kick it off, be my guest. But I know all of us have been users of it as well as in some capacity resellers and so forth.
Mhm.
I probably have the least experience of the three of us here because I started mostly with what I was learning through Industry 4 or 4.0 Solutions, Walker Reynolds and the crew there at Intellig Integration. And it was before I joined Proto Labs, I was working for a consulting firm here in the Twin Cities, and one of our clients was asking me, "Hey, have you ever worked on building an MES?" And this is circa spring of 2021. And I said, "What do you mean MES?" And then that afternoon, I started looking, and by coincidence, one of the interesting videos that came up right away was Walker explaining what an MES system is. It's like a short 8-minute video, and that kind of started me in this path of understanding more software for manufacturing. And through the training, of course, Walker talks about Ignition a lot. And for me, the experience was very easy to download and set up in my machine. No credit card, no nothing like that. So it was the onboarding experience was like a very easy setup and getting to know. But once you open the application after the installation, there is the click world of UIs and things that you can do and should do with it. And at least I had the reference of what Walker would do in his videos, and I had an idea on how to connect to an MQTT broker, for example, or a database, things like that. So, but to create usable UIs, that I think that's probably where you can get lost and never come back for air in some of those things. I don't know. I'll stop there. See, Brian, what do you think?
Yeah. So my experience with Ignition is mostly on the edge side of it, mostly for the HMI side. But I think where we kind of got to start off with it is where SCADA has been, and then what Ignition has kind of brought to the table. So most of my experience with a lot of the legacy type of software out there is like Factory Talk, MES, and those that have worked with it and in comparison with Ignition, hands down, Ignition is definitely a way better platform to be using than a lot of the older stuff. So I think for the people in the industry that had been utilizing SCADA softwares for years, decades, even, their view of what Ignition provides compared to what they've have gone over the years worked with. The availability of the data on how open the platform technically is, where you can connect whatever database you want, whatever data source you want, and also the ability to do all of your visualizations in the browser is a major technological advantage comparative to any of the other SCADA softwares that are out there. So I think because of that technology that's now available, it's already garnered a ton of kind of cultish personality behind it. And like I'd say Henry has been getting a bunch of slack for it.
Yeah, I think you guys, I share your sentiments. Really, I do. The joke I made when I was going through university, as I had an interest at the time to pursue a graduate degree, was all of my fellow colleagues would essentially be spending the next 2 years really learning one type of SCADA. I mean, masters for any type of automation or systems engineering programs out there were essentially how to become an expert in Rockwell Factory Talk or insert some other OEM software here. I mean, it is seriously like that. You genuinely need 2+ years in order to even understand how to go about and execute simple tasks and just go about with day-to-day activities. And God help you if anything breaks out of the ordinary. Um,
Mm.
and so that stuff like a licensed server might not be synchronizing, or a workstation is having some sort of problems with the network. Um, could be very simple as the switch has just gone bad, but now you have to figure out, is it your SCADA software or what else? I mean, it essentially is likened to needing an entire fleet or army of people to manage one software platform, and it's not even the end all be all for your business. Your business has to manage all sorts of other software utilities too. Um, so it was quite fascinating to me. I agree to this day, bar none, Ignition as far as branded SCADA softwares go is eons ahead. Whether it be for transparency of pricing, you can go right now and package out what you wish to purchase. While it might not be 400% accurate, where else are you going to get that level of access to some other
You
tooling?
don't.
You really don't.
You really don't. Everything's behind closed doors, behind like 9 different exchanges of emails, and then maybe by the end of it, you'll get the actual cost for it, and that's after you've actually like POs have actually been or requests for quotations have been approved.
Mm. I wonder to what extent this ability to get started so fast and so easy and for little to no money actually opens the door for this type of technology to come into an organization from the OT side of the house. And then when they have something going and want to now support it officially and get budget to pay for the tool to do like a hub and spoke or an enterprise level implementation, Now the surprise, the sticker shock comes in, and the IT side of the house, it's the confrontation kind of starts. So I wonder to what extent that is in their interest to have the ease of access of the technology, so that then the hands of the IT side are tied at that point, because it's like, well, this we need this technology. What are you gonna do? I don't know, Brian. You from the integrator side. You have you seen some of that? Some of those.
So
Yeah.
I typically haven't gotten too far into the SCADA applications. Most of it is definitely on the edge for it, but the biggest advantage is with Ignition is really just been able to do all of your development up front to then justify whether to go with a certain brand or not. You can't exactly do the same with, say, like Delta V,
Mhm.
which is a DCS, or some other bigger software platforms to do. And because you're able to have this development, um, it pretty much fact checks itself.
Mm.
You don't have to buy and cry like once you realize that what you just bought was a big hunk of crap, pretty much.
Because well, the malleability of what you can do, that's probably makes it easier to take, because you with one platform you can create an unlimited type of user interfaces. It's not just
Mhm.
one thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
I will say that there is that applying it past the process control layer, which pretty much like above MES and SCADA applications, then I think you're really utilizing Ignition wrong.
Mhm.
You're overextending its capabilities. Uh, and in that case, then like you really become the Ignition platform really becomes your platform, and then you kind of get stuck in that position for it.
Yeah, 100%. I think the contention people have with some of the things they perceive that they heard from me is Ignition has no place, period. But I think fundamentally, platforms like Ignition, be they at whatever software layer, SCADA and otherwise, have a very particular role to fill in my eyes. I think primarily for especially greenfield environments, you can really do a lot very quickly, and you can take the you can eat the technical debt and some of the licensing issues that you might face along the way, because you're able to rapidly build something and really get it out to the business, and honestly have some pretty good IT general controls over what you just designed in order to essentially meet your obligations as a business. Because every business has to have some sort of IT general controls inside of it. And so I think in that facet, it does a very wonderful job. I think beyond that, even at the SCADA layer, if you're trying to do a lot more with a platform like Ignition, it becomes very unruly. And I think ultimately the question is a build or buy. And frankly, I think a lot of the times, at least for what I advocate, is better to build. The expectation for SCADA, I think, is you obfuscate all of your instrumentation and field devices by having your controller as your go-between and being your more or less data collector, and you essentially try to aggregate and talk just to a controller if you can help it, primarily because some field devices and other instrumentation might not support some other data pipeline right out of the box. But a lot of the times it's actually not possible. You really cannot obfuscate all of those pipelining out by talking and using your controller to do so. And I think naturally you find yourself into building a lot of custom applications using whatever variety of software technology, uh, you know, be it based on what level of skill set you have internally, personal experience and whatnot. But that's ultimately my general contention with tools like Ignition. And I think the primary way it also should be used, I think you guys definitely back me up on this, is to serve more or less as a data pipeline builder because again, you have a lot of built-in controls into the Ignition platform. It's really like a whole RDBMS tool, right? Similar how anybody that's using a Microsoft SQL Server management tool, not only to write the script but execute them and have all sorts of ops type of capabilities within it, accounts provisioning, you have all that in one tool, and that's critical, right?
Mhm. I think that it speaks to a larger problem in the OT side of it, where EOT really does not have enough support from IT on delivering these types of software packages or just services that they really need. Uh, it's just been years going on where OT gets whatever they have, and then they work with whatever they got, and it doesn't matter how well structured or if it's like meant for it or anything about it. The only thing that really kind of matters for OT is that they get the problem solved.
Production is king,
Mhm.
basically.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yep.
One thing with the installing the tool and starting to learn what it can do, with the experience of different solutions that I know in the market, and many of them open source, like were mentioning in some of your articles, Henry. It's hard for me not to make the switch and say why this licensing over the next 10 years will have to be subsidized like this for our company, when I know that using these other pieces of the puzzle can help me achieve the same thing. I liked it because of the ability to understand the problem of a manufacturing operation a little bit easier, because it's kind of gives you the ability to build a bridge to a solution very, very quick.
Mm.
But then when you're there, it's hard for me at least not to think, hey, but hold on a second. Microsoft Orleans is an actor framework that can help me with these things in IoT. Um, I think, Henry, you probably put a video on
Streamlit.
Streamlit.
Yeah.
Yeah, it like uh, that's probably more nipping at the heels of Tulip in that case, but it's the same kind of concept there, right? So there are tools out there that can enable something for a much lower price point. But as I was learning, Ignition definitely was an easy bridge to cross.
Mm.
Yeah, the joke I make is OT is really software development. I think people don't want to say that, but it is. There's just a physical piece of media that you have to configure. But guess what? You do that through what? Through software. There's obviously some instances where instrumentation and equipment is in fact not. It's relay operated, and those relays are not in any way, shape, or form controlled by some mechatronics. It's all just physical media, and even there, you can have some baked in software automation as far as data aggregation out of what's happening. You might not be able to control to make them actuate via software, but you can still aggregate data out of them. But it's software development. It truly is. Whether you're configuring a switch or setting up firewalls or everything else in between, what are you doing at the end of the day? You might have a GUI interface, for some sort of Cisco piece of equipment, a controller, but you're doing what? You're doing software development. Even when you're creating PLC code, just because you can use ladder logic and the structured text, it doesn't mean that you're not doing software development. It just looks like the means through which you're getting there might be, at least at the surface, differently, but fundamentally, in my eyes, it's just software development. And with that is why I mentioned open source earlier, because you dive into this space right off the bat. And I think for a lot of folks who might not have had exposure to the whole software development lifecycle and what it means, they're probably for the first time, I imagine, just broaching some of these topics and are beginning to just begin understanding how really, really deep this rabbit hole goes.
Hmm.
I don't know if you guys have had that realization for yourselves or thought about that before.
Oh, definitely. Even when it comes to my business and the actual business side of it, regardless of the engineering, like ERP softwares or website management and tools associated with just utilizing the web for your business, a lot of the stuff is free. A lot of things are maintained by the community of people that use the software or that develop the software. And why don't we have this in OT? Why isn't this like something that is proliferated into the OT side of stuff? Well, the businesses that exist in our space really have not kind of allowed it. And we have not exactly had like the OT side of customers really haven't shown interest because they don't know any better on it.
Mm.
And the tools that are available for OT don't exactly exist for us. And so we're really just barely starting off on the OT industry's journey to open and free open source free software.
And Ernie, are you Henry? Are you getting at the issue that yes, these tools like Ignition, I would add code in there, and it's software, it's logic. But then if I need to change it next month, or somebody touched that script, what did they change? So that the management of that code in that is embedded in the tool, um, I I feel that, and I don't have a lot of experience with Ignition as you guys probably do, but do you know if it has the ability to manage code like you would with a Git repo, for example, or something like that? 'Cause that's
So,
to me the problem that I see, because like Flow, I think with
mhm,
or sorry, no
yes,
Node-RED,
mhm.
you can you can get the JSON of your flow and put it into a Git repo and maybe have some sort of code management expectation, have PRs and things like that to that code. But I don't know something like Ignition if they haven't matured to the level that that is possible in the code that you put in the tool.
So if I do remember correctly on it, there is ways to do Git versioning of Ignition. And I think there's a couple of companies that specialize a lot more on it. One company specifically, um, I4R Cloud,
Mm,
they do more on the pharma application of Ignition, and they talk regularly about Git versioning Ignition. Now, as for the scripting inside of Ignition, I mean, again, it's within the platform, and you're kind of residing it inside of it, and you do have the issue of, okay, say now you want to transition away from Ignition to another SCADA platform. The only other one that I really know that is similar to Ignition is Frameworks by Tatsoft.
mm,
Uh, to do that transition, you have to transfer all of those scripts from there to the new platform, and all the other tie-ins that you've done in Ignition now need to go into another SCADA platform, and you're ending up with a lot of technical debt for doing so, and you're doing a lot of doubling of your work
mm.
because of it. While rather instead of doing, say, in Ignition, the scripting is Python 2, rather than doing your scripting inside of Ignition, you take it outside and put it you put it on a different server, one that you can version control a little easier. So there are ways of kind of taking your existing infrastructure and taking it outside of Ignition, but it kind of resides into that problem of you're using Ignition for your everything,
Mm.
and eventually you're going to get yourself kind of locked in some way, in some manner, because you're having to pay for it, and you're going to eventually do that calculation down the road of, okay, how much is it going to cost for us to transition from this closed system to a free and open source one? You're going to have to try to justify that cost.
Mhm.
And rather, you could have just started off using a free open source platform And then you could plug in maybe some of these other proprietary sources to do the services that you want. So for example, trying to do track and trace an MES application in Ignition, you could do that,
Mm.
but it might be better for yourself down the road to do that application in a free and open source, maybe do it in Python, and then connect that with your Ignition instance.
Yeah. My contention is with the fact that does it need to, right? Does this functionality absolutely have to reside in a single source platform like Ignition because of some technological incapability? The answer is no. It truly does not. And I am all for the opportunity of making a what I like to call a plugin store, which is very, very common in the software world. It's very common. All sorts of vendors sell commercial proprietary stuff, no big deal. And what they do though is a really good job of opening up to a very good degree the back-end capacity for people who wish to not only do it for a potentially hobby, but to truly make a business case out of it where they're able to sell these connectors more or less that can offer you the capability to do this without needing to get into any sort of licensing agreement that is very secure, that in the means of you only can say and do anything with that backend in a programmatic way after you signed more or less your life away. Do you really need to do that? My contention is you don't, and I think people will eventually go down this path of asking this question as well. You truly don't. And why is it that still to this day it is not a capability that is out there in the open? And to those folks that would say, well, it requires staffing and resources. If there's people that are able to do this on much bigger platforms and have larger communities that are already doing this and building businesses out of it, why is it that we can't then do the same for tools like Ignition?
So like in Tulip, you see that there is the community market where if you have an idea for some connector, you can create one and publish it and get it, scrutinized by the community. But it's not the same in Ignition. There's if you want to provide new connectors, it's more of a closed environment where you strike a deal with Ignition to create, or with inductive automation to create those. You guys know?
I don't know
Like,
specifically.
yeah, like with Tulip, and you don't see only in like Tulip, you can create your own connectors. There are other like data ops of platforms like Domo or Snowflake, where you can create these community provisioned connectors for whatever the problem is. And I don't know if those are um, you can monetize those as an individual, but I don't think that the Tulip ones are. But at least you get the claim to fame. Like, hey, my connector is out there in Tulip, and 1,400 people are using it.
Yeah, it's an opportunity. It really is. It's an opportunity not only to better your platform, but it's an opportunity to really allow other people to also begin thinking about how they could potentially be a competitor, right? You
Mm,
want diversity in this facet because ultimately, my overall contention with closed source systems is this expectation people might have of a business existing forever. And what are you going to do when that business is not around? How are you going to
mm,
rebuild any of the software packages? What if that license server that you might not even have known was actually required to deploy and implement this capability of this module is just no longer there because the business is no longer there? And do we really need this level of more or less subscription based models up the wazoo for everything?
mm,
And why is it that this is such a common trend, not even just at the SCADA level, but broadly speaking for every level of industrial automation, as well as on the consumer side of life. It is such a this is like the norm, and I
Mm.
think people just might not who might who grew up in an earlier era are seeing this, at least I am, and saying this doesn't need to be this way. And people that are growing up in this era, sadly, it might be growing accustomed to having this. You'll pay you'll own nothing and you'll like it type of model.
Mm. Yeah.
So I'm just now reading up on Ignition Exchange, which is their community ignition ready resources built by the community for the community, as they put it. You're allowed to upload or you're allowed to download whichever of the packages or libraries you want from them. As for submitting and uploading, it does go through a review and testing before it does get published.
It's like an app store type of deal.
I think it is a bit of an app store type of deal. Yeah.
I did want to ask for your. I think this is a good segue into sort of web app development, and I wanted to get your feedback, Anibal, for what you think and what your experiences has been on the reliance and importance of web, and just generally what people's take that you might have seen on it are.
I would say the emphasis probably should be placed on APIs, be the like the meat, and then the layer for visualizing things like thin clients, also web based. There's a plethora of different frameworks to to creating user interfaces like that. But then the problem becomes when you build an API and that API depends on 3 or 4 other things, be it a database or other APIs, and how do you test the whole thing? How do you ensure that your API is behaving correctly? And then compound that if now you start creating multiple smaller APIs, microservices to start, putting together the daily business of your organization. How do you test the whole thing together? That's a big problem because the tendency is to try to deploy and test everything together before you count with you can say, yep, I have something that's working. And we fall into that trap that we have to test everything together. There's a channel on YouTube by Dave Farley, Continuous Delivery.
Mhm.
Excellent resource to understanding these problems of testing. If we are saying we have microservices, it's because we're saying that that thing can be independently deployed at any point in time. Well, if it has dependencies, then the trick becomes how do you test those dependencies without having to have the real thing there as you test before you publish it to a runtime environment, be it like a quality assurance or a production or staging type of environment. That's to me the problem where people want to get there, but then get into the trouble of how do we make sure this thing runs okay, runs correctly. And um, I don't know. That's what I'd say about that in web application development.
Yeah, I don't know if either of you have heard of United Manufacturing Hub and the solution they provide, but the what I liken it to is a platform that builds platforms, sort of
Mm.
like the next logical progression of low code platforms that let you build apps, more or less a app that builds other apps, but you can really deploy solutions that are orchestrating, right, the entire operation of fleets of application, and as well as all the connectors they require and backend services to manage it. We'll love to get your take on it.
Oh, I love United Manufacturing Hub. I talk with them quite often, actually. So, a lot of the problems with um, services that manufacturers need and use quite often is the infrastructure behind it. Um, and what we've been doing, the OT side of stuff, is you just have a server with Windows CE that just run the application, and you just cross your fingers and hope that it doesn't turn off. That's mostly where a lot of OTs, servers and technologies really kind of, how they kind of run. And there's such a gap between OT technologies and IT technologies and how they're actually being implemented, right? And I'm not talking about like, Aviva and the way that they do their software and then like, some other ones. I'm talking about how actual manufacturers are utilizing the softwares that they have. And there's such a big disconnect between like IT uses Docker images all the time. They go with high availability, high reliability, and all that sort of fun stuff. But all the way over in the OT side, we just cross our fingers. We just hope that doesn't turn off. And if it does, it's just the next fire that you just got to put out. We don't exactly set up much of an infrastructure for doing it. There is like redundant servers that some do put on, but like I said, a lot of the time it's just not really utilized. So there's such a big disconnect between the infrastructure that runs the plants compared to the infrastructure that runs IT. And what I really, really love about United Manufacturing Hub is they're providing that infrastructure for services to build up and on top of. Whether you want to use Node-RED or whether you want to use a different data modeling or data ops tool, like HiByte, for example. In many regards, HiByte is a fantastic tool. It's a proprietary tool, but it's a fantastic tool. But with a infrastructure that allows you to take an application, put in a new one quickly and easily, and you can have the certainty that application is going to keep running and will always be running, and the data that you get from it will always be consistent. That's a massive advantage. And there isn't any of that infrastructure in place for OT. And United Manufacturing Hub is the only open source platform right now that provides that. So that's what I really, really like about United Manufacturing Hub. They're the only ones that are actually doing that for manufacturers that is truly free and open.
Did I hear you say Windows CE? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
That's really advanced stuff, man. Hold on a second there. You're light years ahead.
You'll find some pretty horrendous things on the platform, man.
It's that like a OEM type of thing where they found something that sort of they like. It's easy to integrate, and they are willing, and Microsoft is willing to pay, get the money for those licenses without the need to really improve to move something like UMH, for example.
Yeah, well, a lot of manufacturers don't really know anything about IT and the way IT works, and like a lot of the advantages. Most of the time, it's you have a production schedule that you're trying to meet. Okay, what are the requirements? How have we done it before? And the reason why you go back to these older technologies is because it works. It's reliable in the sense that it's proven to work. A lot of the newer technologies, they don't have that maturity, or they don't have the ability to prove to a lot of these representatives, like the key stakeholders, that they're going to work and that they are reliable. And a lot of the newer generations that are now getting into manufacturing, I think a lot of Gen Z people that are then getting in are starting to see of like, whoa, what are we doing with Windows CE? What are we doing with all these old like 1990s style GUIs? And we're having to work with it. And why do we go this route? Why aren't we doing something else? It's like, well, the reason why is because we know it works. And in manufacturing, you need things to work. They have to work, even if they're old. But for certain, they're going to work for 10 years because they already worked for the past 30.
In a dusty, humid environment without failing. Yeah.
And it doesn't become, and it's not an issue for the OT people until it is an issue. It's just the state of where manufacturing is.
Yeah,
So
my contention with the lack of support for assisting small, medium, and large side, but especially honestly for the smaller manufacturers out there, um, there are there's supposed to be in theory, right? Because everything freaking works in theory. That's why you have process engineers when they go to design stuff. They always put in, one sensor or one fail-safe device here, and the joke is one is never enough, two is one, and so on and so forth. But
Yeah.
there are, in theory, state-funded organizations dedicated exclusively to doing this type of work. Frankly, I am disappointed in all of them, and essentially, I don't think out of malicious intent they are adapting the same business practice that the McKinseys of the world adopt, which is tell us your need and pain point, and we will point you to a fleet of commercial products that we have had experience with or other people we know in our network have had experience with. Purchase these products and they will solve your problem. And what is, in fact, in my eyes, really should be happening is you're supposed to offer long consultative periods where you have dedicated resources to essentially serve as an in-house software developer. Um, and frankly, it's not for a lack of money. These places have funding. I don't understand why this practice is still being pursued, where let's just give them a fleet of products and off they go. I mean, that's a slap in the face for all small businesses out there.
Well, I think it's because it's easier and more lucrative to do so. If you're talking about any sort of business out there, I mean, most of the time, we're profit driven. I mean, any business must be profit driven to, stay alive and to provide for your stakeholders and those that are involved with the business. And there isn't this like need, this driving force for us to go in that direction. And slowly we're getting to that point. People like you pointing out the hypocrisy behind it and the engineers that are having to work with it and deal with it because their budgets are getting cut in half because they have to just buy this proprietary software.
Mhm.
So I think it's just because of the state of where we're at. And we're having to deal with a lot of growing pains if we're wanting to go into a better direction for manufacturing.
For a moment there, Henry, it sounded like McKinsey is like a magic quadrant matchmaker, and that's their
Yeah,
function.
yeah, for sure, for sure.
But then that's maybe it started with a great intent, but it over time has been corrupted because of the influence of the ones that want to be on the magic quadrant.
Yeah,
And I used to have respect for it, but then I realized, you know, maybe more cynically that that's not exactly what they are after. Like it's just a sticker
Well,
purchase.
nothing stays good for long.
Yeah.
Eventually things go bad. That's
Yep.
how it goes.
yeah. I think this is ultimately where. So I tell people my role model is Louis Rossmann when we talk about a champion of all things, and he's not perfect, but a champion of this same exact issue, but on the consumer side. Lewis has, again, he's received death threats. He's received false citations from the U.S. government on things his business did not do and other sorts of malpractice suits. He's
Mm.
ultimately he was driven out of the state of New York because of all of the horrendous corruption, and he's moved over to Texas for what? Well, all he was trying to do was not only fix computer electronics at a very reasonable rate, but also on the component level when it comes to just replacing instead of uh, components instead of whole modules. That was his approach, and the fact that he's dared to do that, we had as a whole society the audacity to put him really through the ringer. And I mean, this is the norm. And the fact that people can be okay with this, and for the sister organizations I mentioned that are supposed to help small businesses do this, I can understand on the corporate level, profit, yes. We're talking about state-funded organizations, state-funded entities, where our tax dollars are going into this and they're shitting the bed. How is it that that is fucking acceptable? I have zero sympathy for it. They're public servants. I don't care that they might be employed. Maybe the government is giving it to some channel provider, just as the same fucking way that we buy ERP software and other commercial software for businesses. It doesn't matter. These are taxpayer dollars funding these people's salaries, benefits, and everything that they execute for services to these businesses. It is a slap in the face to say that, well, profits, well, it is disgraceful. Like, these are taxpayer dollars. They're public servants, whether or not they want to say so. And just like we hold all other manners of public officials accountable, just like you might see people who get into spats with law enforcement officials and getting their rights violated. This is no different in my eyes. They're doing to small businesses who are the taxpayer and to us as individuals the same that law enforcement officials and other public servants who dare violate the rights of the public who are operating legally. It's a disgrace.
The state of software right now is really bullering, extremely, and how things have been going is not exactly been pleasant.
But then you are still hear stories like Node-RED, and there was an article just a couple of days ago that the makers of Node-RED kind of told the story of how it started and how it's continuing. Hopefully, it stays with that mindset of open and able to accept inputs from the community and make the tool better over time in that regard. But then at the same time, it created a market for other people to make a living out of helping or using that particular tool.
Yeah, it's possible. People talk about the feasibility of being a profitable enterprise using the open source model of building and deploying software. And I'm not talking about open architecture, right? Which you offer programmatic means to build out functionality that platforms like Tulip offer through a market type of exchange. But I'm talking about the entire life cycle of how you're conducting your quality assurance tests and beyond. This is the way that we have to operate because, especially in the field of industrial automation, we are talking about fundamental infrastructure that allows all of us to survive as a species. Why is it that we accept private interest groups who have no incentive to do any goodwill in how they not only build out their products but support them and whatever they put into those products and services as well? Why is it that we accept that bar to be so freaking low when we know it doesn't have to be, when we know for sure the open source model, not just of development but even licensing and all the complexities that come with it, work for a very long time? That's my contention with it.
Speaking of licensing, when discussing free open source software, do you guys have a particular type of licensing that you look for in the products that you consume? I'm talking like a GNU or MIT type of license. Anything you guys target?
The GNU one, definitely. If you can take that software and you can do whatever you want to do to it, as long as you kind of don't resell it, I have no problem with it. Because it gives me the ability to solve my own problems at nobody else's cost. And some businesses, some software providers may be able to take advantage of it and kind of gamify their software to where, it's kind of crappy to where you need to call a representative. And because you got to call a representative, now you have to set up some sort of maintenance agreement with them to do it. And, the giving your customers, giving people the ability to work on their own problems is very empowering. And it pushes them towards the direction of using your software more. So I don't exactly know why we try to close things off. We try to put barriers behind the customer to force them to go over these hoops. And eventually, there's going to be a better software that provides a better service or gives you the type of service that provides way better than what you're having to deal with. So I mean, it's just more of an eventual. Customers are going to get fed up to a point where they're not going to put the money towards that business anymore, and it's more of a short-sighted thing to put barriers behind your customer and not do right by them.
I definitely see the independent integrator as a crucial player in this, because that's the person that will be educated about the market and the options on the market for solving problems, and are the ones to be the ones equipped to speak in favor of the end consumer on this stuff. But I can see also bigger powers can start throwing open the floods of money and compensation and capture that's because that's like talk about Rockwells and there's territories, and all of that kind of goes to crap because the special interest that gets formed there, and people are going to
Yeah.
do what benefits them most times. But
Yeah.
hopefully people like you, Brian, independent, don't sell
Well,
yourself.
Oh, definitely not. Definitely not.
Amen.
Especially with with the 4.0 community and
Oh yeah.
a lot of the people in there where we all are on the same agreement on like where the industry ought to be going and the future of integrators and what integrators are providing or where integrators ought to be going is leading and educating
Yeah.
manufacturers. Manufacturers over the decades have lost their edge of understanding what is going on the plant floor and how to actually produce. So we're ending up in a state where manufacturers, say one of the big three, where most of the people that are working there don't even work for the manufacturers, or those that know about what's going on the plant floor or know about the machines aren't the engineers that work there. It's the contractors. It's the integrators that get called in when their machine goes down and do the service calls. Gone are those days, and we really need to bring manufacturing back to where the manufacturers know their systems, they know their machines, and they know what to do with them because they've been educated about it. And where systems integrators need to go is being that leading force, or at least being the educators for manufacturers on how do we set up an MES, how do we do UNSs, how do we build our machines, how do we do this, and
MTRs, that
Exactly.
minimum technical requirements, that is such a key peg of the whole pyramid here. But
Yeah, I think even this will be a good way to wrap things up. But even to Brian's last comment with open source technologies, where it might not be built out to where you can do absolutely everything on your own, and there's a difference between free open source technology versus open source software technology. We won't get into that here, but even if it's not perfect, all I'm simply saying, and the fact that people are so up in arms about this, all I'm simply saying is there should, at the very least, be the option of choosing some sort of open source software technology to use with whatever commercial product you buy. And that does not exist on the component level, because I've worked in semiconductor fabs, from how the raw sand gets procured to a chip gets manufactured to then security controls and bloatware added onto it to intentionally not allow other tooling to be used on it, or intentionally crap out when they detect other tooling that's not branded by the vendor of choice. All I'm saying is we should at the very least have the option, even if the alternatives are completely useless as they are, just to have the option. That's all I'm saying. And apparently that really rubs people the wrong freaking way.
Agreed.
Yep.
So,
Well,
thank you guys. Anibal,
this was awesome. Thank you, Henry.
thank
Brian,
Yep.
good to meet you.
Yep.
Good
You
to you
too.
guys.
Where Anibal, where can they find you at? Just on LinkedIn?
On LinkedIn, Anibal Velarde. That's passion for help, especially if you are a software engineer with 5 years of experience or less. Love to help out with pointers, education, like Brian was saying. So, yep, hit me up.
And Brian, where can folks find you over at?
So you can find me on LinkedIn at Brian Pribe. You could also find me in the Discord, the 4.0 Solutions Community Discord, and then also my website, so mockcontrols.com.
All right.
Very cool. Thank you everybody for your time. Appreciate it. And we'll see you on the next one.
Yep. See you guys.
Peace.
Take it easy.